Luis Armando Albino was born in Puerto Rico. In the summer of 1950, his mother Antonia moved him and his 5 siblings to Oakland, California. On February 21st, 1951, 6-year-old Luis went to Jefferson Square Park with his 10-year-old brother Roger. While they were there, a woman in her 30s, wearing a green bandana around her head, came up to Luis and began speaking to him in Spanish. She told him that if he came with her to a nearby store, she would buy him some candy. Luis went with her. Roger waited in the park for his little brother to come back, but he never did. Roger then ran home to tell his mother what had happened. A massive search was launched involving the police, soldiers from the Oakland Army base, the Coast Guard, and city employees. Numerous nearby bodies of water were searched in case Luis's body had ended up in one of them. Roger was interviewed multiple times about the day of the disappearance and the woman in the park. Luis's mother Antonia visited the police station every day in hopes of getting news about her son. As time went on, these visits became weekly, then monthly, then yearly. However, she never gave up hope that her son was alive. She made multiple trips back to Puerto Rico, thinking that perhaps Luis had been taken there. 1966 marked the 15th anniversary of Luis's disappearance. Rather than be discouraged by this, his family viewed the milestone as a new opportunity for them to find him, as he would now be 21 years old and eligible for military service. They hoped they could find him listed in official selective service records, but they could not. Antonia never wavered in her belief that her son was alive. His photograph was always displayed in her home, and she carried an article about his disappearance with her in her wallet. Even as decades passed, she continued to pray that she would see Luis again before she died. Unfortunately, she never did. She passed away in 2005 at the age of 92. Luis's disappearance was not a family secret, and his nieces and nephews grew up knowing about him. The family's long search for him was a regular topic of conversation. One of his nieces, Alida Aliquin, took a commercial DNA ancestry test in 2020 purely for fun. However, when she received her results, they showed she was a 22% match to a man she had never heard of. She immediately thought that he could be her long-lost Uncle Luis. She sent a message to the man through the site, but did not receive a response. In February of 2024, Alida watched a documentary that featured Puerto Rican folklore and was inspired to more actively pursue the lead she had found in 2020. She and her daughters began researching the name from the DNA match online and at the Oakland Public Library. After finding pictures of a man with that name online and seeing the resemblance he bore to other members of their family, they believed they were on the right track. They went to the police, who in turn contacted the State Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to open a new investigation. The man Alida had matched to on the DNA site was located on the East Coast. He was a father and grandfather. He was also a retired firefighter and a veteran of the Marine Corps who had served 2 tours in Vietnam. The man believed to potentially be Luis provided a sample of his DNA to investigators, as did Alida's mother. On June 20th, 2024, investigators came to Alida's mother's home to tell her that the results of the DNA test had confirmed that her brother Luis had been found. Where on the East Coast he lives and what name he has been living under have not been released, so I will continue to refer to him by his birth name of Luis. Luis was interviewed by the FBI. He has some memories of the kidnapping and being taken to the East Coast, but the adults in his life never answered any of the questions he asked them about those memories. He believed he was the son of the couple who raised him. On June 24th, 2024, Luis arrived in California to reunite with his siblings. When Luis met Alida, he gave her a big hug and thanked her for finding him. The day after he met Alita, she took him to see his brother Roger, the last member of the family to have seen him before he was kidnapped. The brothers shared a long hug and spent a lot of time talking on topics ranging from the day of the abduction to the experiences they each had in the military. Luis's first trip to California in June was short, but he returned in July for a 3-week trip to spend more time with his family. While Luis was not found in time for his mother to see him again, he was found just in time for his brother Roger, who passed away in August of 2024, just weeks after being reunited with his younger brother. Alita was relieved that her uncle was able to see Luis again before he passed away. "I think he died happily," she told the Mercury News. "He was at peace with himself, knowing that his brother was found. I was just so happy I was able to do this for him and bring him closure and peace." Catherine Romer was always the life of the party, with a vivacious personality and a love for spending time with others. She had 1 son and 9 granddaughters, but had a way of making each one of the sisters feel as though they were her favorite granddaughter. She was regularly at her son's home and a major part of her granddaughters' lives, but seeing her always felt like a special occasion to them. When she came over, it still felt as though a celebrity were making an appearance at their home. Catherine loved traveling with her granddaughters and taking them to restaurants to introduce them to new and exciting foods. Catherine was a widow. After her husband's death, she had remained friends with Charles Romer, who had been a friend of her late husband. Charles was the father of 2 sons and a retired Sinclair Oil executive. According to one of Catherine's granddaughters, he was a lovely and generous man. Like Catherine, Charles had outlived his spouse. After years of friendship, Catherine and Charles had gotten married. 76-year-old Catherine and 74-year-old Charles lived in Scarsdale, New York, but were snowbirds. They spent their winters living in an apartment in a motel Charles owned in Miami, Florida. They were very rigid in their travel routine when it came to driving to and from Florida. Every year, they stayed at a Holiday Inn in Brunswick, Georgia, after their first day of the long drive back to New York. Their routine in 1980 was no different. They checked into the Holiday Inn just before 4 p.m. on April 8th. However, they never checked out. 2 days later, a hotel maid found their belongings inside their room, but it appeared that the room had not been slept in. The couple could not be found. There were no signs of foul play in the room. A Georgia Highway Patrol officer reported seeing the couple's car near some restaurants approximately an hour after they checked into their hotel, but no further confirmed sightings were ever reported. Catherine's son, Frank Heller, said in a press interview that he was concerned that his mother and stepfather had been abducted. The couple was wealthy and known to people in the area because they had such a consistent routine when traveling to New York each spring. His mother was reported to have been wearing an estimated $81,000 worth of jewelry at the time she disappeared. The search for the Romers was one of the largest in the history of the state of Georgia and involved local law enforcement, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Coastal areas in both Georgia and Florida were searched. However, no sign of the couple was found. As years went on without answers, Charles's son, Charles Jr., remained in contact with law enforcement, and Catherine's son Frank made multiple trips to Georgia to continue looking for them. Charles and Catherine were legally declared dead in 1985, 5 years after they went missing, and their $1 million estate was settled. On November 22, 2024, Sunshine State Sonar was working at a pond in Brunswick. The nonprofit group brings together volunteers with specialized skills to perform underwater searches in hopes of locating missing people. The group had come to this particular pond to follow up on a tip that a vehicle may have been submerged in it. They located the vehicle, a 1970s Ford sedan, but then decided to investigate the pond further. In doing so, they located a second vehicle. There was zero visibility in the pond, so divers had to go by feel as they tried to gather information about the vehicle. On one of these dives, a diver reached into the car through an open window and felt something hard. He picked it up and brought it to the surface. It was a human femur. The vehicle was the Romer's 1979 Lincoln Continental, with a custom license plate and monogrammed headrests featuring the couple's initials. Some of their personal items were located in the car. While DNA testing of the bone found in the car will take months to complete, the couple's families have accepted that Catherine and Charles died in the car. The pond is being drained in hopes of finding further evidence or remains. The pond where the car was found lies between the hotel where Charles and Catherine were staying, now called the Royal Inn Hotel, and Interstate 95, a new Jessup highway. The pond had been searched during the initial investigation, although it is unclear how thorough that search was. Based on the proximity of where the car was found to the parking lot, it is possible that the car was accidentally put into reverse and driven into the pond. Sadly, none of Catherine or Charles's sons were alive to learn what had happened to the couple. However, Catherine's granddaughters are grateful that a group of strangers worked so hard to finally get them some answers. Even though it appears Charles and Catherine died in April of 1980, all of the circumstances indicate that they were killed in an accident, which is a relief given the fact that their families have spent decades fearing all possible scenarios, including them being tortured and murdered. Catherine's granddaughters spent Thanksgiving together shortly after the car was found. According to Catherine's granddaughter Christine, the whole family just shared stories about them. It was a happy time because of this resolve we're feeling. It sort of gave us permission to celebrate their lives and talk about the fun memories without the feeling of dread, sorrow, and sadness. In 1983, 20-year-old Paul and 19-year-old Melody Jones were young and in love. The newlyweds lived north of Earlsboro, Oklahoma, down the road from Melody's mother. On May 4th, Melody went fishing with her family and was dropped off at home that evening. Their families would never see Melody or Paul alive again. The following morning, May 5th, Melody did not show up to work at the Dairy Queen in Seminole, Oklahoma. The manager there called Melody's mother, Carol, to see if she knew where Melody was. She did not. Carol therefore went down the road to her daughter's home. When she arrived, she found that the front door was slightly ajar. When she looked inside, she saw her son-in-law Paul's body. Her daughter was nowhere to be found. It was determined that Paul had been murdered. There was no indication that Melody had willingly left home. All of her personal belongings had been left behind. Police believed that Melody had been abducted by whoever killed her husband. Police searched for Melody on foot, by helicopter, and on horseback, but did not find her or any clues related to her disappearance. Over the years, dozens of potential sightings of Melody were called in, but none of them ever proved to be her. The case was formally reopened in 2009. In 2017, a tip came in about a location where Melody's body may have been buried. The sheriff's office conducted a major search, digging in multiple locations on the site, but did not locate anything. On August 7, 2024, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations announced that Melody's remains had been identified. They had actually been found in Seminole County in October of 1998. They had been transported to the office of the Oklahoma Chief Medical Examiner, but no identification of them could be made there at the time. It took until 2024 for the office to receive the resources necessary for them to perform more extensive testing on the remains. Once they were able to perform this testing, the remains were positively identified as those of Melody Jones. 2 weeks after Melody's remains were identified, her family held a funeral for her and laid her to rest. However, their 41-year search for answers is only partially over. We've got closure, but now we need more closure, Melody's brother, Randall Garton, told Fox 25 News. While Melody's disappearance has been solved, whoever murdered her and her husband remains at large. Authorities are continuing their investigation into the murders.